Clerk. Okay, I call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, October 18th, 2022. And we'll start with Land Acknowledgement. Dr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. This is the first land acknowledgement I've done at a council meeting since we had the National Truth and Reconciliation Day on September 30th. And one of the things we learned on that day, it's the first time we've had members of all of the Treaty 7 nations present for an event in Canmore at the same time. And one of the things we learned on that day was just how important it is to make and hold space and to allow people who have been victims or survivors or related to people who were victims from residential schools, just to make space for them to talk about or say whatever they need to say so that they can begin to heal and we can begin to learn. And for me, that reminder of making and holding space is just really important. So I'm happy to give this land acknowledgement today as just one more way that we can create space and stop for a minute and remember that we all have a responsibility and further work to do. So with that, I will acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Iahé Stoney Nakoda Nation, the Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki, the Blackfoot Confederacy, composed of the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Métis Region 3. And as part of Truth and Reconciliation and the reality that we are all treaty people, we all have a responsibility to understand the history of those lands and to ensure that we do better going forward for all of the people who came before us and all those who will come after us.
Thank you. Now turning to the agenda for today's meeting, are there any changes? None? I will then move that we approve the agenda for the October 18th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We have a couple delegations this morning. So B1, Regional Police and Crisis Team. Who is going to be coming forward? Welcome to Council.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. So I'm Corporal Dave Bebo with the RCMP. I'm part of the Cochrane Regional Police and Crisis Team. I supervise all of the Southern Alberta teams. Right now there's one posted in Rocky Mountain House, Cochrane, with Asquin and in Coaldale. One soon to be going into Gleason. And my partner here is, I'll let her introduce herself here.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Hansen. I'm a registered psychiatric nurse, and I work for Alberta Health Services, and I've been employed with them for about 18 years, working in community mental health.
So the RPAC Teams is a new program with the RCMP. There's a three-step, it's going to be phased in 3 years, kind of. We have done year one, which is phase one. It's 6 teams. So there's 6 teams right now that are deployed across the province. It's an RCMP member with an Alberta Health Services clinician with them, and to assist in mental health calls. Step 2 is coming up this year, where we are within step 2 right now. Is to 6 new teams coming up to as well at 6 different locations. At this stage right now, these 6 new teams, it's only RCMP members because AHS, there's no funding right now for a partner. And step 3 is going to be the following year, which is going to be doubling all of these teams to have 2 teams per post. So like Cochrane will have 2 teams to cover the area here. What RPAC does is that our goal is to minimize or to help the front lines with calls for service, and to especially in the mental health field. So this way, just like most of these calls can take longer time and can be lots of different calls with the same person. With our team, with the expertise of AHS with them, we can dedicate more times to these calls and to get the clients what they need as far as like a better treatment, or what they're not treatment, but like the better approach of what they need to try to get them what they need to minimize further calls for service, both on the AHS side and on the RCMP side. So we've been active in the area here since April of this year, and this is all scaling up here. We have a big area. Our jobs are all funded by the province, and then the Cochrane team that covers Cochrane here, we cover Lake Louise, Banff, Canmore, Cochrane, Airdrie Rural, Didsbury, Olds, Tree Hills, Chestermere, Strathmore, and Drumheller. So we have a big area. So if we're in the area, then if there's a mental health call that comes in, we can go and assist the local members with that call. And then, or if we're not, the local members can give us a call by phone, and then we can do some of the stuff by phone to assist them. And if this comes after hours or we're not working, then they can send us a referral, and then we can follow up with that client at a later date to see if they did get what they as far as programs or like referrals, and to try to get them the help that they do need. And then so that's part of our program, and this is a goal to as well as to get less calls for service by getting them better service, and to as well with AHS to get them the proper place and the proper way on the mental health side.
I guess the only thing I would mention to that is that hopefully we're working as a bridge for police and for our clients and for their families, and also for obviously AHS to come together. Obviously we have sometimes difficult times communicating with each other because we're probably speaking two different languages, of course. And so basically we're just translating for each other. It's very hard to explain what my opinion is on deterioration versus an RCMP member. So again, there's just those good conversations that we get to have and that dialogue about why this is important or what we should be doing in my clinical opinion and the RCMP's opinion. Another important part I'd like to consider is the fact that we are taking referrals from the mental health clinics, of course, and that gives them a real chance to communicate with police, because a lot of times, again, we felt like we haven't been able to communicate effectively and explain what this risk likes and why we're calling and so on. And again, it's just keeping those communication lines together, and I think that's the most significant part about our pact. Hopefully what we also are encouraging is, again, understanding that mental health and crisis is that it's not just one time you go, it's multiple times, and it does take time and to resolve or to lessen any type of crisis or mental health services. This isn't, oh, you go once and then it's taken care of, which unfortunately RCMP only have those types of resources most of the time. But with the mental health component, we're well aware that this is going to take several attempts. This is, we'll take this case this far this time, but maybe if we get another thorough referral 4 months later, we'll just go back and try again. So that's what we're looking at.
As an example here locally here, during the summer there was a client that has drawn between Banff and Canmore 18 calls for service within a period of 2 months. This client was not a suicidal client, but it was deteriorating, and the local members, I mean, if I would have been one of them at that time too as well, it probably been the same way, is that we did not think that he was going to meet the criteria for a form to bring in. But with the expertise of Tanya, she reached out to that person's healthcare providers, and then with that extra knowledge, then we were able to form that client, and then that client has been brought in to the hospital and has been there since. And this has limited the calls for service, which is good for us and good as well for the client, because now that client has the service and the help that he does need. So this is an approach. As a police officer, we're not always the best one for mental health in some ways, because I don't know that extra things that the professionals do, but by teaming up, then we can share information back and forth, and then to get the better goal for both of our organization and to get the best result for the client and for all of our both organization too as well. And that's what I can think right now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing today about this program. I've actually heard a number of different CBC segments about this type of program being implemented in other places, so I'm happy to hear that it's in our region as well.
Exactly, yes.
What you were referring to regarding the being able to draw on the different sources of information, I was particularly impressed by when I was hearing these reports, and because obviously, you know, in AHS, you're able to access some information and utilize it without disclosing personal information, and likewise, you have the proper training. I am concerned when I hear that there's the AHS funding is not available for the to complement the 6 new teams. Is that something that is temporary, or do you know if...
I don't have much more information than this. Probably that my managers in Edmonton would have more information than this for me. But as far as what I've been told right now, I don't know if it's temporary or if it is, but right now it's not in place right now. But as the RCMP, we have identified people for these new positions, and members are getting transferred in there. And one too as well that I want to mention that there's new resources coming in from AHS too as well. They will be coming up soon, a 24/7 phone line that frontline members will be able to call. When they are responding of a mental health call, they will be able to call that number, which is a police-only number, and to speak with a mental health professional of AHS and to access more of their data. And that person too as well can speak on speakerphone with the client too as well to, again, try to get the proper avenues for that person to go. Because if the person does not need to be formed, then try to bridge them to get in contact with local things, a program, and if they do need, then to strengthen that form with more information together, so one that they get at the hospital, then that it makes more sense for the doctor, and because the more information that they have, the better treatment that they can provide, and we're trying to bolster this up to as well, so that the client can get the better treatment that they can receive.
I just wanted to mention, one of the reasons we're able to communicate freely is that we do have a memorandum of understanding with Alberta Health Services and with RCMP. So we're able to exchange information that's appropriate to the call that we're active on, and also to an RCMP member that is on scene, because there's also that part of risk. And so, of course, I'm going to provide information that will help improve that decision process, or the decision process that we're doing together. One of the things that I can't really speak towards AHS, but there's some of the issue is also just been able to find people to fill the positions, right, even though they are been available again. Sometimes it's challenging, of course, in rural settings, just to attract a qualified member on the AHS side also.
Great, thank you for that. Now, when moving to the third phase and doubling the teams, and hopefully the staffing or funding issues can be dealt with, how many teams would serve this region then?
For the area that would be 2 teams based out of Cochrane.
Okay.
So then the 2 teams would cover the same area, but provide greater hours that we're working, and too as well to be able to divide a bit more. So if we have 2 teams working the same day, one on days and one on evenings, then one can go east and one can go west, and one can, so to provide better coverage and better as well service to the clients in the area as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Faubert, you have a question.
Thank you, Corporal and Tanya, for your presentation. I wrote down your names. I didn't have to remember yours. This is a 3-year start of a permanent program, or is it a 3-year pilot program?
It's permanent right now.
It's a permanent.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
So each of the 3 years of the first 3 years of this program, it's phasing in different things.
Yeah.
So right now, there's only one team for the Cochrane region?
There is, yes, just one team, yeah.
How many detachments do you cover, and how many hours of the day and days of the week are you out there?
We cover 11 detachments in the area here. And then the hours of operation right now are 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Once the normal schedule will be 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and the following week, 3 to 11 p.m. Right now, the issue that we have at the Cochrane unit is that the permanent constable that is there is on light duties right now because she is pregnant. So we are filling up the shift right now on overtime, pending a secondment of someone to come and take that job for the year. And then once, the reason why we are keeping it on day shift right now is because it's easier to find people to come and work on overtime on days than nights. But once that's going to be coming in, then we'll be able to work that rotation. Once the second team comes in, I don't have the final schedule, but the Edmonton team right now that covers the Edmonton area works a 4-on, 4-off, 11 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. So they cover every day of the week between these hours. So I'm not sure if we are going to go to that model or if we're going to go to like a weekday day shift or evening yet. This I don't have the answer for you today. But there's pros and cons on both. The pros and cons is that if you go on a 4-on, 4-off, then you have coverage every day during the peak hours. And then the other one is that you have more hours covered within the week when your partner agencies are working. So you have more time to go talk to your partners, but you have less coverage on the weekends, which is a time of need too as well.
I have another question, unless someone else.
Nope,
Okay.
please go ahead.
How are you measuring the performance of this program? Is it in the outcomes? Is it in sort of like numbers of times you're dispatched, or, what's success?
I can answer for the RCMP side.
Okay,
I'll
yes,
Tanya
yes,
talk about
please.
the AHS side. Right now, we are keeping stats of all of the calls that we're attending to, and time to as well that we're going to calls. Like let's say that we, and when I talk forming someone, is that if we apprehend someone, let's say in Canmore here, and we transport to Calgary, because the closest we have to, on a mental health act, we have to transport to a designated facility, which is in Calgary here, which is the closest. So we are keeping time of like how many hours are we spending going, which is hours that are saving the local detachments here too as well for not having to do that. And then too as well, we are keeping track on all of these stats and how much we have helped, but on the RCMP side, it is more of like the number of calls and the number of hours spent to save the local community to have to do these things. And on the AHS side, I'll let Tanya answer your, yeah.
I guess on a clinical side, what I consider success is moving that person safely through a crisis, and having the ability to hopefully be engaged in services or aware what services or options they have for the next possible crisis. So on a personal clinical level, it's a bit different. We are keeping track of how many referrals, wait times, travel times. Every call or every referral doesn't necessarily result in what I call an intervention of a mobile visit, but it could be a telephone call. It could be just me informing their treatment providers, I got this information, just want to let you know what's happening. So there's a lot of things where I would say, as a clinician, I'm just trying to close the loop better from police to AHS side. So we're keeping a lot of stats. I'm just not sure of every question we're being asked. There's about 20 pages. Well, no, it's just screens, so it's coming. I'm doing my best to do them, but that's all I can say.
No worries. May I?
Yes. you may.
Okay. I'm really grateful that this is a program that exists within our detachment area and in Alberta. I think partnerships between healthcare providers in mental health and law enforcement are critical to the future health of our community members. I myself have been a person in crisis and overcome drug and alcohol addiction. So I know exactly where a person is existing when they come into contact with you. How do we, as leaders in our community, then support this program after the first 3 years? Is there an opportunity for us to write letters, fill out a survey, have a final report, or, lobby or advocate for more resources?
I would say that it's always good to lobby, to advocate for more resources, because that's a program that, in my view, is really needed. And if I can add one thing, just like one thing too, as well, is that sometimes detachment members goes to a call, and then they're talking to a person that is in crisis or has mental health issues, but they don't know that they're being followed by a professional somewhere, and that what are they displaying within the community is sometimes just stays within the police file. But when it comes to us, then I can share with Tanya that can look and say, oh, this person is being followed by this doctor. And even though that this does not require us to go out right now, she can share with this doctor saying that this patient has been doing different things that could be of concern, and then the doctor too as well can then address this with his client, because the client will not necessarily tell his doctor that this was been going on, which is also helping the client and helping the community by bridging and stopping the silos and getting more cooperation between the two sides to hopefully prevent a future crisis and prevent future calls for service for us or for EMS or for anyone too as well. Is that prevention, in my view, is the key, and then if we can get them the best service that we can, then it's going to help a lot. So
Accountability in recovery is very important.
yeah,
Yeah, so connecting those dots.
exactly. Yeah.
Looking to see if there's any other questions from councillors. Councillor Ma?
Thank you so much for being here, guys. What's the operational performance difference? Because I think the gold standard is when the two of you guys are working as a team. Until we have, and right now when there's the two teams, there's a gap and there isn't an AHS person right there in the moment, and so you're making a phone call and stuff. What's the difference in that performance-wise or operationally? I'm curious.
Just want to make sure I clarify the question.
Sure, yeah.
The difference between, so you're talking about what's the difference between an RCMP member calling the 24-hour access line for themselves, or the different, and with me attending a call?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I feel when you're right there, that's amazing. And then.
I think there's a couple of things that are different. I mean, obviously with me right on there, my approach would hopefully be the one to be able to complete that interview and actually do that assessment face-to-face, which an old timer, I still say I think is the best, to the best of our ability. Of course, technology has helped with Zoom, sometimes if possible, but we haven't really explored that yet on our PACT. We haven't tried any calls like that yet. And so therefore actually being there and actually taking in the scenery, and because everything counts. I really truly believe that,
Right.
Are they living with somebody? Is there food in the house, and all of that. What I suspect, a person who's worked the crisis lines for children and youth and for adults and haven't been able to attend due to volume of calls or so on, a lot of times I would say that the call is that you're taking the member through the call. You're actually asking a great deal of questions, like I'm reviewing with them what brought you out, what's your first sense of the call, and then at that time I'm usually looking up information, seeing what type of history I have. A lot of times, I would say from working the phone lines, you're trying to help prove the decision process for that member, and you're also part of that decision process. So on my side, I'm also charting. So if, for example, I go, you know, I've just read, make one up, but even though this has happened where, hey, this is a sign that this person is very unwell. This is what brought this person into hospital 3 years ago. Please consider the Form 10. You can put my name on it. You can say you got this information from me. You know, I'm going to call the hospital that you're going to, you know. So it isn't as good as seeing that person, developing that rapport. Maybe with the call, doing the phone call, maybe some people might go in more if they weren't seen in person. Maybe, I'm not sure, depends. So it's a little different. And of course, the struggle always I have found when I get a follow-up, when somebody's already been out on scene, is that I got to figure out a way to get back in. And so sometimes that's really challenging because maybe the crisis has passed and so the person's no longer interested in services, or the person doesn't understand why somebody from Alberta Health Services is here. And right?
Yeah.
So, and then again, it's very much two members working together, trying to regain that and say, unfortunately, mental illness and addictions impairs an individual's insight. So it's so much better when we can act on the scene.
Yeah.
So again, log is just, I think calling on the scene is a great thing that's really needed. And so I think that would help, because I assume we're going to get referrals from this, from the 24-hour line, I think, maybe I'm wrong. And then we'll be able to just follow up on the ones that are just much more complicated too. Okay. So there's a gain there completely, I'd like to think. I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Either way, an incredible resource, it sounds like, is being accessed by our frontline members. And so that's such a positive step forward. Seeing no other questions, I just want to thank you for being here today. Constable Bebeau and Ms. Hanson, sharing this information is very much appreciated, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you much for your time. Thank you. Thanks.
We'll now move to item B2, Bow Valley Regional Transit Services Commission update. Mr. Bean, welcome to council. I don't think you should take it personally at all that everybody just left the room.
There's still a few people here.
Exactly. Exactly. Welcome.
Great.
Welcome. Thanks for
Great.
being here today.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor and Council. And it's great to have the opportunity to be here. It's been a few years since I've had have the chance to speak. So we'll just do a little overview on the Commission and transit. And then as we just finalized our budget yesterday, we'll go over a little bit on the budget. So just talking about our current connections, it's been just about 6 years since Canmore Local Transit came into service. So now we connect the Bow Valley all the way from Canmore to Lake Louise. Canmore Local Transit, Banff to Canmore service, Banff Local Transit, Banff to Lake Louise. And then we have a number of seasonal routes as well that we're working with Parks Canada additionally. So Minnewanka, Cavan Basin, Johnston Canyon, through the Bow Valley Parkway and Moraine Lake. And it's been a tremendous amount of growth. 2015 we had 7 buses, and 2023 in the beginning we'll have 31. So it's quite a bit of growth. And just on one note on the seasonal routes, Johnston Canyon this year has gone to year-round service with Saturday, Sunday service happening through fall, winter, and spring. And then just looking at the future, we want to continue to expand our frequency, make transit better for residents and visitors on all of our routes over time, hit more trailheads so people have the opportunity to do hiking, enjoy the outdoors, full summer service to Moraine Lake, at some point in the future, potentially Lake Louise and area shuttles. We already do some Calgary and area connections with the On-It service that we hire a contractor, but Rome manages that service. And then the Alberta Parks and Town of Canmore service that we're as you know, is in place for 2024. The other thing that's happening is pretty exciting is we're making the move to zero emission fleet. So we now have 5 Proterra electric buses with 5 more coming in the fleet next year. We're just installing 2 more chargers, so 1 will be installed in Banff, and we're just making final arrangements for 1 to be installed in the Canmore facility as well. So that's pretty exciting. Where for a fleet of 30, we have 1/3 of our fleet is electric, and we're just kind of, as we look to the future, managing what proportion should be electric and how much needs to stay diesel or other alternative fuels going forward. The other thing that we're seeing a huge need for is increased driver training. We have a simulator in our facility in Banff, and I would welcome anybody to come if they let me know if you want to drive a simulator. Some people last about 10 seconds in it, and others it's pretty easy to drive.
I lasted about twice that, I think, about 20 seconds before the nausea set in.
Yeah, but the simulator gives us the chance to do about 40% of our training without going out in the bus, which obviously saves fuel, is a little easier to coordinate. And as we go forward, we've depleted a lot of the supply of bus drivers in the Bow Valley that are qualified and trained. So we're training from a Class 5 license, and we're going to be doing more of that going forward to help pool up our driver pool, so we're not seeing shortages every year. There's a little video of the driver simulator going. So it's pretty realistic, and we can also simulate every kind of bus that we operate. A lot of the controls are electronic, so you just change the bus type, and it becomes the Canmore bus versus the highway coach that we use to Lake Louise. So in talking a little bit about the Canmore service, as I said, we're coming up on 6 years. In fact, in about a week and a half, it'll be 6 years that the Canmore local service has been in place and seen a lot of growth, a lot of changes over the years, including the move to fare-free transit, which has been doing great for our ridership. Just this last year, we changed to split the service, so we now have the 5T and 5C out Three Sisters and Cougar Creek, so covering both sides of the valley and making the connections easier for residents to move around. We have right now about 35-minute frequency most of the day, goes to 70 minutes later in the evening, and then some shorter service hours on weekends currently. And you see the ridership trend. So year to date, up until October 10th, 131,000 riders. We're projecting about 170,000 riders, which is up substantially from the 143 that we saw in 2019, which was the previous biggest year. And if you just look the last couple of months, 17,000 riders in both August and September, so about 560 a day, or just over. So people are using transit, and they're using it just to go for a couple blocks, or they're using it to go across town, or they're using it to go to Wildlife Distillery and have an easy ride home. So Canmore also supports the regional service, multiple stops between Canmore and Banff, and that's again on about a 35-minute frequency, and we already have previous approval to go to 25, which will be happening next year, so we'll be adding a third bus onto that service. And the ridership there too, projected about 190,000 riders this year. 2019 were 198,000, so it's stayed strong and is back to pretty well pre-pandemic levels. And then overall ridership, we're about 1.3 million in all roam services this year. In 2019, we were about 1.5. And I'll talk a little bit about the requisitions and the differences between what was previously approved and what we're presented in our budget this year. about 190,000 difference in operating and 20,000 in capital. And a lot of that we're seeing due to a couple things. Maintenance labor increases are definitely higher than we had planned. Aging of the fleet, increasing downtime is causing us to spend more on maintenance. Allocation of a parts person, which is coming up this year, that we do all of our maintenance through Town of Banff Fleet Services. They would be hiring a parts person, which will hopefully decrease our downtime. And also we're seeing some overtime through labor shortages, and definitely more downtime due to parts availability, which is challenging. The other big increase is our driver wages. We were providing breaks for our drivers, but our breaks were being eaten up by buses being late and having the schedule too tight. So we've extended the schedules to make sure our drivers get the proper breaks that they deserve. And some of it is increased congestion of vehicles, some of it is decreased speed limits, and then the volume as you go up in riders, the route takes longer to do because you're boarding and deboarding people at various stops. And then some of what we're looking at initially to increase service in Canmore on local transit while still using the same equipment is to increase the service hours so that we are running basically from 6 a.m. till just after 11 p.m. 7 days a week, which will match the Route 3 service. So it needs some increases on in hours on the Canmore service to be able to have about 18 hours a day on the buses, which makes it more convenient, safer for people to get home at night. There's a lot of restaurants that are closing later at night when we're only operating 70-minute frequency now. So these service additions would help that, definitely. And then on Route 3, at the Commission Council, we've approved some increases to the Route 3, which would basically make it 7 days a week, the same schedule. Right now we're a bit shorter on weekends. And then also adding an hour in the evening, so our last departure would be just after 11 o'clock from Banff, whereas it's just after 10 now. And then just, our mission statement from the Commission and our strategic plan says that as an essential service, we operate, enhance and grow our regional transit system through innovative and efficient transportation solutions to ensure that residents and visitors are able to live, work, and play in the Bow Valley without the use of a private vehicle. And that's really what we're trying to do, and we're seeing the results of that already. That a lot of people either aren't owning cars or aren't using them nearly as much as they would in the past. That is the last slide that I have.
Great, thank you very much for that presentation. Transit's near and dear to my heart, and I very much enjoyed my time on the Commission, and I'm very impressed at the growth over a very short period of time. I do have a couple of questions. So affordability is an issue in Canmore. One of the drivers of affordability or lack thereof is transportation. Transit's obviously a key element in both the mode shift, but also creating affordable ways for people to get around town. Now I understand there's going to be some sort of a feasibility done to take a look at where growth might happen. Am I correct in that, or yeah?
Yeah, you are correct. We've contracted Dillon Consulting to do a feasibility study on Canmore local transit and where the growth should be and how it should be accomplished over the next number of years.
Great, and then that will give us data that will help prioritize growth, because there's neighborhoods like Larch, Palliser, large portion of Bow Valley Trail that are not serviced yet, and certainly those things would be something that I would personally look forward to considering in the future.
Definitely, and it will also determine whether there's an opportunity for some innovative changes to the way we do transit, so potentially some on-demand in some areas, basically on-demand transit where you log in and book a vehicle to pick you up at a certain time to meet up with the regular transit route as well. So.
And before turning to other councillors, I just wanted to confirm, it looks like our local routes took a bump in alignment with paid parking coming in. And is my interpretation of the numbers correct in that?
It is correct, yes, definitely.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Martin, for your presentation. A lot of success for Rome, a lot of potential for the future, but challenges with meeting the demands in terms of labor. What's the plan for the Transit Commission moving forward to address that so that we can continue to grow, even though right now it looks like growth is difficult because we don't have the people to grow with?
Yeah, from the Commission's perspective, we're looking at staff accommodation as one solution. It's an area that we've lightly looked at in the past, but never really delved into. And as I mentioned earlier, we've exhausted the Class 2 drivers, which are the fully trained drivers that come from charter coach companies or retirees that have their license. So we're either attracting new people into the valley to drive buses, or we're training them from Class 5, so a regular car driver's license. We're going to try and use both approaches. We're also doing more year-round training versus the normal March training to get ready for a busier summer. The other area that we're looking at that I'm pushing hard on is if you want to start a new service, it should be a year-round service. So it shouldn't just be to relieve congestion in the summer months. If we can offer employment year-round, we attract people that are looking for careers, and it pays well, and it's a good career job. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to ramp up by an additional 30 drivers every summer.
So just can I pick up something on that and then go back to you? So one of the things that I asked about when we were dealing with the new seasonal route that was approved through the funding from the Alberta government up to Quarry Lake and up to Grassy Lakes, is it possible, instead of treating that as a seasonal route, could we treat that as or create a regular route with perhaps a seasonal extension or something that makes it more of a year-round thing? Is that something that's being looked at?
That is being looked at, and be working with Mr. Sarte on that. And I think that's an excellent concept, is that, even if it's a regular route, the challenge that comes in is if you have a regular route through the winter months, and then all of a sudden you're not providing the service in the summer because it's taking an extra 40 minutes to get up to Grassy Lakes and the Nordic Center.
Yeah.
So the other possibility is potentially that route could operate on a less frequent basis in the winter months. So we're looking at all opportunities.
Perfect.
And that's part of the 2024 start versus trying to rush into it in 2023.
Thanks. Councillor Faubert, thank you.
Well, that kind of led into my follow-up, which is, the Transit Commission definitely works with like Parks Canada and now Alberta Parks. And there's definite areas where we're delivering service to visitors. But what happens when delivering service to visitors means there's less service to residents? Like, how do we balance the fact that there are two distinct groups with different needs that somewhat overlap?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. It's something we've really been looking at and potentially limiting some of the services that we are committing to. And on the flip side of that, for our Bow Valley to have the robust transit services that we have, visitors are a part of that.
Yeah.
For our resident population, we have a lot of transit opportunities. So we've got to make sure we balance the growth so we are taking care of residents.
Thank you. Tough questions from Tanya. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Meehl. Kind of following up on that, do we have stats between visitor and local usage? Probably not, eh?
We have estimates.
Estimates?
That would be about it. And the only way, and it's actually even harder in Canmore because of the fare free for everybody. In Banff and on the regional route, we can look at multi-use passes versus cash fares.
Right.
And kind of draw some conclusions from there.
What is that rough estimation?
It was about 50, I just looked at 57% passes.
So,
And
57% residential?
Correct.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hard number to track, and I didn't think we were, but that's just interesting. One of the pushbacks we got for paid parking here in Canmore was our residential parking process from the MD. And I wonder if you might be able to bring us up to speed on any conversations with the MD as to what they're looking at for regional transit over the next while. And
Yeah, our conversations with the MD so far have been recommending a feasibility study and seeing how they could integrate with Rome services. So I'm not sure where they're at on that feasibility study, but that's been our recommendation rather than just jumping in. Let's see what would work and how would it work. Is it fixed route? Is it on demand?
yeah, I look forward to that.
I gotta say, we've opened the door and left it to them to come back with any type of integration from a feasibility study that they think would work with Rome.
Cool. I look forward to seeing that feasibility study and where they progress there. Thank you.
Councillor Mara.
Thank you for your report to council. This is just a couple technical questions, or I don't know if they're even technical, but for information regarding staffing. And I'm sure you're experiencing right from the top to the bottom. Some of the comments that I've heard out in the public when they've actually looked at, driving for Rome was one, the length of time to be interviewed to get to be at the next step for training. And is training, is it a paid training that goes on, and how long does it take to train a driver?
Yeah, the training, so we're trying to improve our processes. This summer was very challenging.
And I understand, yeah.
And we ended up for the summer about 10 drivers short of where we wanted to be, and actually had to eliminate some services and reduce frequency on a couple of our Banff and Parks routes because of that. So we are streamlining our processes, and the training is fully paid. And training can take, for somebody with a license, could be 2 weeks. For somebody that we're training without a license, could be up to 6 weeks, but it is paid training.
It is paid training.
So we have a time frame that we would estimate about 4 weeks, but then there's certain people that learn faster and need a few more, others that need a few more training sessions.
Thank you.
I had a question around, I read in the paper some time back, not too long ago, but little ways ago, that Banff was wondering about free transit for their locals on the regional route, which of course we share with Canmore. So I was wondering, is that idea progressed or being considered by the commission at all? And if so, what would be any implications for Canmore?
So it was discussed at our commission meeting yesterday, and that ask will be going forward to Banff Council. It was brought to the commission just for review yesterday and thoughts, and we'll be bringing back some recommendations and thoughts on it for our November commission meeting, but it will be going forward to Banff Council. I think the impact on Canmore will be that Banff residents get a free ride on regional and Canmore residents don't. So that the perception would be the main thing. As far as a financial impact, Banff will be paying for any losses. So we've worked out a tentative formula that makes sure that Canmore is whole through that process. As Canmore pays 50% of the costs of regional.
And how is that? would that be done? I imagine it's an extension of what they're doing with their local, they have to register or something to get the pass?
Yeah, so right now, all Banff residents that have applied for a pass have a physical pass that's a Banff residence pass. Basically, we check a box within our software system, and it would allow those passes to be used on the Route 3 regional route, and then we would have tracking from there on how many Banff residents actually take rides.
Right.
And then Banff would be charged accordingly.
Have you noticed with the Banff free local service, has it increased the number of residents, or has it just simply decreased the cost to residents?
Increase the number of residents. Again, we don't know exactly how many are riding.
Right.
But since May, we had 52,000 Banff resident rides on transit, which is fairly substantial number. And that doesn't include all the hotel staff that we left them with their hotel staff passes.
But do you know what it was before, because there was no passes? Would you be able to
There
track
was
that
no
before?
real way of tracking the.
Yeah, so you don't know if
resident
that's an
ridership.
increase. I mean, it's a positive, it's a reducing cost to the rider, right? Okay.
It is, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. Mr. Bean, I just wanted to clarify an answer that you just gave about Banff's fare-free Route 3 request. It was trial ballooned at our meeting yesterday, but the commission hasn't approved it yet.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
They'll be
There's
coming
still a few
back.
steps
We'll
in
be discussing
between.
it before the November meeting.
Yes, and so
for the
they
commission
were
to either
looking,
endorse or-
the Banff admin was looking for feedback, and so we'll be providing that feedback from both ID9 and Town of Canmore, because it's not just Canmore, it's also Route 8 to Ban Lake Louise. So there's two partners that are affected by this, and so I think there's more discussion to come, but it hasn't been approved yet. I just wanted to clarify that.
Great.
By the commission, rather, or the Town of Banff, actually. Anyways.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum / Chair of the Commission. Yeah. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time. Oh, Councillor McCallum.
I just wanted to thank you, Martin, for the work that you've done over the last year and through the course of the pandemic. I don't know if you all read The Best of the Bow, but Rome Transit was voted the best use of tax dollars in both Banff and Canmore, which is a credit to Mr. Bean himself. He's made the service what it is. You really are the heart and soul behind this whole organization. And I think that sort of accolade from the community really is representative of the fact that Rome has become a nice to have and has become a need to have. And it became that essential service that we all wanted and needed during the pandemic. And that is definitely due to you and your team. And so I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the support. We really appreciate it. And as always, strong support for transit in the Bow Valley. And thanks for the opportunity today.
Our pleasure, and we echo Councillor McCallum's sentiments, so thank you. All right, so we are now moving on to item C1, minutes of September 27th. Were there any errors or omissions that anyone noticed? Nope. All right, then I'll move that the minutes of September 27th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting are approved as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now we'll move to item D1, staff reports, Safe Park Program Pilot, final evaluation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Elle West. I'm working as the Housing and Community Evaluator with the Community Social Development Team, and I'll present to you today on the Safe Park Program. I'll just queue
Ms.
up
West,
minutes.
welcome to Council.
Thank you. Okay, today I'll present to you some history of the Safe Park program, some details of this year's pilot, the outcomes and challenges, and I'll leave some time for questions at the end. Back in 2018, we noticed an increase in the number of individuals camping or sleeping in their vehicles, particularly behind the Save-On grocery store and in between Save-On and Elevation Place in that gravel parking lot. And as we know, it became known as the Vanmore area. The number of vehicles parked in this area would swell in the summer and decrease in the wintertime, and one count done in the summer of 2018 revealed about 90 vehicles parked in that one location. In 2019, Council directed a prohibition on parking between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. specifically, so that vehicles were moving at least once a day and not staying parked more than 24 hours in that one spot. And then later in 2019, Council directed administration to hire a seasonal outreach worker. And the job of that worker was to do some research on other communities, see what their approaches were, to monitor the impact of the parking restrictions, and to collect some information and demographics on these people sleeping in their vehicles. That report that outreach worker did gave us a few key points. One of them being that there is more than one group of people who are staying in their vehicles. We have seasonal workers coming to Canmore to stay usually for the summer. We have visitors to come to hike, bike, recreate in our area, and we also have those with higher needs. Usually people in this category are not choosing to live in their vehicle. They may be experiencing homelessness or using it as a last resort and could use more social supports than the other two groups. Each group is distinct and has their own needs, but some people do move between each of these groups. And through surveys with the people in their vehicles, 38 of them identified as being seasonally employed here in the Bow Valley, and of the businesses surveyed, 14% said that they knew of at least one of their staff members who was working for them and sleeping in their vehicle at the same time. This report done by the outreach worker in 2019 also told us some of the key concerns that our community had about this Vanmore situation. First of all, being affordability. Of the people surveyed who said that they couldn't stay in other locations like staff accommodations or campgrounds or rental suites, affordability and availability was the #1 reason. When it comes to vehicle management, we noticed that there were some vehicles that were uninsured, unregistered, unmaintained. Some people maybe even use this area for long-term RV storage. When it comes to environmental impact, there were concerns specifically about garbage not being disposed of properly, not kept in the bear-proof containers, and of some wildlife attractants in the area. With perceived crime, there were comments that community spoke of both in regards to the people sleeping in their vehicles and worries about their safety and safety for other community members because of the presence of these people who were congregating in their vehicles behind Save-On. With parking, the concern was just that with 90 vehicles in one spot staying long-term, it took away parking stalls for other people in short-term use. With traffic and road use, the concern was that with this congestion of vehicles, other vehicles weren't able to get through very easily, especially when it came to emergency response vehicles. And the growing population meant that that lot was becoming very overcrowded. Liability relates specifically to the Provincial Traffic Act, which tells us that vehicles can't stay parked in one spot longer than 36 hours if they're a recreational vehicle or 72 if it's a car. Based on the information in the report and based on all of these concerns listed here, the pilot program was recommended, specifically to address the seasonal worker population living in their vehicles. This was not designed to be a housing program. This was a way for those who are already living in their vehicles to do so more safely and to maintain their employment in the Bow Valley while they were doing so. For the other two groups of people who don't count as the seasonally employed in Canmore, the visitors and those with higher needs, there was information provided on campsites to those who were visiting, and people with higher needs were supported in accessing other community resources. So the pilot program was approved in February of 2020, and not 1 month later, the COVID pandemic happened, so the pilot was postponed until 2021. Then on June 15th, it was launched with some incorporated safety measures for the COVID pandemic. There was not a high use rate of that program in 2021, and it was approved to run again for another pilot in 2022. This year, the program did run again. We started on June 1st this year, and there was an opportunity for people who were interested to sign up before June 1st, pay a deposit, and reserve their space in the program. There was a total of 40 stalls in 4 different lots, 2 of them being private lots and 2 being municipal lots. Each person in the program could park their vehicle from 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. and needed to move in the morning. And security services were contracted specifically to ensure the safety of the people who were in the program and parked overnight, and also to monitor the lots and see how many vehicles were parked, how many were participants, and how many were not. Each lot was provided with a bear-proof garbage bin and recycle bin and a portable toilet. And new to this year, we incorporated a shower program, so any participant who was part of the Safe Park program could come into the office and get shower tickets, which would allow them to go to Elevation Place, use the change room and showers there. We also allowed businesses to apply for up to 5 spots if they wanted to hold spots for their employees. And since the town of Canmore has incorporated paid parking downtown in daytime hours, we gave the people who participated in the Safe Park program a chance to sign up for the resident daytime parking permit as well. Eligibility for the program looked much the same as it did last year. Each participant needed to show that their vehicle was legal with valid registration and insurance, and each operator needed to show a valid operator's license. Everyone participating in the program needed to be employed in the Bow Valley. Each one needed to agree to a responsibility agreement for the program and then pay the program fees. Initially, those fees were paid every 2 weeks. The deposit was paid before June 1st, and that held their spot for 2 weeks. Each person who wanted to renew and stay longer would do so on a 2-week basis. Here are some outcomes that compare specifically last year to this year. Total number of inquiries, applications, and registered participants. So we had a total of 11 unique vehicles who signed up and paid to participate in the program this year, and that represents 13 people, as some vehicles had more than one occupant. The people who did inquire and submitted an application but decided not to register for the program, most often the reason they cited for doing so was because they found alternate accommodations, usually a rental, a hostel, or a friend's house. And of the people who applied or inquired but were not deemed eligible, most often it was because they were not working in the Bow Valley. They were usually visitors. They might be looking for a parking space and have no intention of sleeping in their vehicle. And there were a couple who were not able to show that they had valid registration and insurance for their vehicle. In both years of the program, there were no tickets given to any participants and no reported incidents of any suspicious or criminal activities, no impacts to the environment such as improper disposal of garbage or wildlife attractants. The program outcomes were measured the same as last year's program to remain consistent. We collected data related to the same 3 outcomes as last year, one being that the program meets a community need. And we measured program demand and eligibility to see if this was happening. As we saw on the last slide, there were 13 participants this year, which is not a high number, but it is significantly increased over last year. The second outcome was measured by program satisfaction. Early on in the program, we did hear some feedback, and we don't know for sure if it was people who were participating in the program or community members in general, but there was dissatisfaction expressed specifically in regards to the cost. At a cost of $10 a night, average out to $300 a month, many compared this to the same cost of staff accommodations. And staff accommodations would provide somebody with an indoor bed, warm, sheltered, an indoor shower, a washroom, a cooking space, and these things were not provided in the Safe Park program. After hearing some of the feedback, there was a decision to change the price of the program, and as of August 1st, we reduced the fee to $5 a night. Each participant in the program was given a survey, and they were asked to rate their satisfaction on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most positive, and the average rating we got back was 8.5 out of 10. Of the participants who did participate, 82% of them renewed their stay beyond the initial 2-week period. And of the ones who completed the survey, all of them said that they would use the program again, and they said they found the program user-friendly. 83% said that the cost was affordable and that the program helped them maintain employment. The business partners that we had in this program, Save On Grocery Store and Trinity Church, were also satisfied and both agreed that they'd be willing to partner again if this program were to continue next year. The final outcome, number of overnight parking violations being low, was measured by our team, the municipal enforcement team. They told us that there was a total of 120 interactions this year, 37 being tickets given and 83 being warnings to people who were camping within the municipality of Canmore, who were not program participants. Some of the challenges that we had this year. First of all, low seasonal worker population. The Canmore Job Resource Centre told us in their 2022 labour market review that the issues the Bow Valley labor market would commonly experience have escalated in breadth and depth, and this is compounded by disruptions from the pandemic. Previously, in 2021, there were 904 job vacancies posted at the JRC, and this year, for that exact same time period, there were 1,690. Payment logistics was another program challenge. Because of the need to renew their participation every 2 weeks, and even some people deciding to pay retroactively because they weren't sure in advance how many nights they would need, depending if they could secure space elsewhere. This meant that a lot of time was spent tracking who stayed, how often, what night, and where, and communicating this information to municipal enforcement so that they weren't giving tickets to people who were program participants but were warning people who hadn't paid yet. And it also was a challenge for the participants who told us that because they were employed, it was hard for them to come to us during business hours to make their payment every 2 weeks. The Municipal Enforcement Operation Plan, the Municipal Enforcement Team was certainly a necessary partner for the success of this program. Even without a full team in place this year, they provided education and enforcement, which reinforced the benefit of the program to the current participants and also encouraged new participants to join. This team was occupied with training for new staff members for much of the summer, and that did reduce their ability to patrol some of our lots. The last challenge was the porta potties, particularly one located near Elevation Place, which experienced a lot of high use, especially after the Thursday markets, which meant that we need to increase the servicing and some increased costs for the program. And then also the porta potty near the skate park, which did experience some vandalism and required some replacement and, again, a higher cost for that. We do not believe the vandalism was a result of the participants in the Safe Park program. Challenges associated with individuals camping in their vehicles in municipal areas is not going away. We've been staying in contact with other communities who share this observation. Communities of Tofino and Ucluelet seem to have similarities to our community, with a mix of visitors, seasonal workers, and those with higher needs. They have opted to use the temporary use permits to allow seasonal workers to camp within their municipality. And Squamish took a different approach. Theirs was to increase education about campgrounds, washrooms, and bylaws, and then also increase enforcement, specifically of the bylaw that does not allow camping or sleeping overnight in any public place. We've also been asked to share our experience with the town of Duncan, who reached out to us as they are considering options available to them regarding the same situation. One thing that stood out most of all is that regardless of what option was chosen in these communities, there are significant resources needed for each one of these approaches. The approach that we chose for our community has resulted in a decrease in the key concerns that were mentioned earlier in this presentation. The concerns of vehicle management, of overcrowding, of limited road use or limited parking stalls, the same concerns we had earlier are no longer concerns that we're hearing from our community. The concerns of potential crime or environmental impact have been demonstrated not to be an issue with our program participants for either of the 2 years that this pilot ran. As we continue to recover from the pandemic, we anticipate our seasonal worker population will increase. The high job vacancies noted by the Job Resource Centre and the increase in Safe Park participants from 2021 to this year could mean that we'll see an increase in participation rates if the program runs again in 2023. If this happens, we would recommend some adjustments to the program. One would be to eliminate the recurring fee payments and have a one-time fee and deposit paid at the beginning of the program. We believe this would make the program more accessible to the participants. We would also consider reducing the lots from 4 to 2, which even with an increase, if that were to happen, would still provide plenty of space, but would reduce the cost of security patrolling 4 different lots and reduce the cost of septic services to 4 different locations. Creating an assessment for workers in Canmore without a business address would also be a need. There are many who identify as freelancers or contract workers and don't have a direct employment contract with a local business, but do provide a service here in the Bow Valley. We would want to create some clarity around that and exactly who is eligible and who isn't for the program. And last of all, we would continue to work with other town departments, including streets and roads and municipal enforcement, to ensure that signage is clear and consistent, and we would continue to incorporate the learnings from this pilot into next year. And last of all, I will leave you with the final slide, which is just some quotes from some of our participants this year. And I'm available for any questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. West, for the presentation. Very, very informative. And I appreciate providing the history as well, since not all of this council was there for the early parts of these discussions. I had a question about the upfront fee that would be looked at going forward. Well, what is the average stay of a client?
This year, the average stay was 25 nights.
25 nights, so
Yeah.
about 3 to 4 weeks.
Some stayed for the whole summer, some stayed for a shorter time, yeah.
Right, right. So they would need to, if they were going to come stay and they thought, hey, I'll probably need something for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, they would just pay for that block, and then if they needed longer, they would renew in some form?
That's what the system we had in place this year, to renew every 2 weeks. One of the considerations we had, if this continues next year, was to pay a one-time fee and deposit. And then we know they're in the system, the security patrols overnight know they're in the system, municipal enforcement knows they're in the system, and they get a deposit that maybe some of it gets returned to them at the end of the year, if there's no infractions or damage or worries, and some of that would be retained as a fee to help incur some responsibility for the program and to help offset some of the costs of conducting this program.
And I see the benefit in administrating that. I'm wondering, what would the size of that fee and deposit be? Because I'm concerned it might be a barrier.
Yeah, I think that we both, through the office and also with municipal enforcement, have seen some people who are still sleeping in their vehicles and choosing not to join the program, and fee and cost might have something to do with that. We were discussing the possibility of a one-time payment of $100, with 50 of that being returned at the end of the year if there's no infractions.
I see. So they would need to have $100 to get into it. Okay. Looking to council to see if there's any other questions. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the mayor's questioning there. So if you were to stay for the summer, how much would you pay up front?
$100.
Flat fee, doesn't matter if it's, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry to interrupt there. I just wanted to be clear that we haven't actually come up with a fee yet. So these are just ideas that we're looking at right now. So what we're thinking is we want to make sure that something is affordable and attainable. We'd work with our department, our FCSS department, and with Job Resource Center to find something that is a feasible fee. But it isn't $100. We're still figuring that piece out.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that barrier is a challenge that I know you're all aware of, and I'm sure you'll find reasonable ways for that to come forward to us. From 4 lots to 2 lots, which lots are we looking at removing from the?
One of the considerations is having services nearby. Most people who commented said that they really appreciated being near Elevation Place. That's where the shower program was. Some people who could afford to do so were even buying memberships at Elevation Place. So there's indoor washrooms, there's showers, there's running water.
Yeah.
Same with the rec center. Other locations didn't have all those services available, but we haven't actually ruled out any possibilities yet. We just think that 4 is not necessary.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Ms. West. For the 2 lots that, if the program does run forward, what's the capacity amongst the 2 lots?
This year we had roughly 10 spots, 10 parking stalls in each of the 4 lots. Depending which locations we choose, there would be room to keep that same number of stalls, just congregated to 2 areas instead of 4.
Okay, so it would be, say, like the 40 spots spread
Roughly.
out over 2 lots. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. West. You made a comment earlier that the original price for the Safe Park program per night was too expensive, $300 a month, and that it competed with staff accommodation pricing. Have you had a chance to fact check that? Do we know what the average, because I paid $300 20 years ago, so I'm just curious as to what staff accommodation is going for on average. Maybe the Job Resource Center has numbers on that?
I don't have an average in front of me, but I know that there is quite a variance between employers and in the type of accommodations, many of them being shared accommodations with a lower price, of course. And some people did say that they preferred staying in their vehicle because of the independence and not being tied to an employer. after cost.
Gotcha, okay. So, and the range is 300 to?
Some would provide, yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I hesitate to say.
All right,
Yeah.
if somebody could email that to me, that would be great. Thank you.
See, Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you for the presentation. So in the report, it was the total Safe Park program cost was roughly $34,000. Do we have a rough estimate of, with removing the 2 lots, what the number would look like going forward? Would it be the same? Would it go down a bit? Like, just, do we have a rough ballpark at the moment?
If we reduce to 2 lots, we do expect that price could go down a bit. Most of the significant costs, aside from staffing, was the septic services and the security. Patrolling each night, 7 nights a week, yeah.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for Finance Committee. Any other questions? Councillor Graham.
Security patrols, you mentioned that was a cost. That was put in place for what reason, and what did it address?
Specifically to ensure the safety of the people who were parking and participating in the program, to keep an eye on them. There was also a number provided. Each person had a hang tag that they could put on their mirror, and it gave phone numbers for, in case of emergency, if they needed to contact the security officers, they, instead of just the 2 patrols each night, they could come in. They gave numbers for the FCS office, for RCMP as well. So they had a measure of safety added that they wouldn't have had if they weren't participating in the program. And they also kept track of how many vehicles, which helped us with our compilation of data and noticing how many people are using the program or just parking and not using it.
And was the feedback on that positive from users?
There were 2 particular users who stated that they were happy to know that there were surveillance happening throughout the night while they were staying there, and it made them feel safer while they were sleeping in their cars.
Thank you very much.
See no more questions. Thank you, Ms. West, for your presentation and answering our questions today.
Thank you.
Very well done. Now, we're going to move ahead with our property tax policy amendment. Ms. Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I will be presenting today the proposed amendments to the property tax policy. We are proposing amendments to the policy to reflect the change to municipal tax rates for tourist home rental option, so that they're calculated in parity with non-residential class municipal mill rates as directed by council when approving the property tax bylaw for 2022. That was in the spring of this year. We're also proposing changes to the policy format to align with our current policy template. This policy hasn't been before council since we've used this new template, and that would include some section numbering, vision alignment section being removed, and then also the addition of a section which addresses policy review going forward. As a point of clarity, given that both the tourist home and the tourist home personal use classifications are residential subclasses, council only has the authority to adjust the municipal tax rate and the vital homes tax rate for these properties. The education requisition, which is shown here as the school support, is applied to properties based on residential and non-residential assessment split and then submitted to the province. So we just collect on their behalf. And the Bow Valley Regional Housing Requisition is applied using the same tax rate across all property classes. In May of 2022, when the property tax rates were set and approved, a change was made to bring tourist homes non-personal use aligned with parity in the non-residential class from a mill rate perspective. This was done on the municipal portion of the tax rates, as you can see in the chart in blue, just in that top row under municipal. There was no reference at that time, and we didn't think to ask and clarify that question around the vital homes piece. And so we do want to make that recommendation going forward with this policy update. that we align the Vital Homes mill rate with the non-residential class mill rate as well. Okay. Just checking my notes here, 1 second. Since the equalization of the tax rate between non-residential and tourist home properties was applied only to that municipal tax rate, you'll see this as a second change. That didn't come up in the spring, and again, we apologize for that. Going forward, then starting in 2023 with mill rate setting in the spring of 2023, we would increase the Vital Homes tax rate for tourist homes to one that is equal to the non-residential tax rate, supporting that intent, I think, of council to tax those at a commercial rather than a residential rate. As a point of reference, our tax and property coordinator has calculated that would have been a difference of about $70 in 2022, that Vital Homes piece. So I won't comment on significant or not, so sorry. So then for updates to this policy, we're really looking at Section 9 for that clarity. A tourist home property will be taxed at a rate equivalent to that of a non-residential property for municipal and Vital Homes taxes in recognition of the fact that it is being used in a non-residential visitor accommodation style manner. So it's that difference between personal use, commercial use. It can be rented out for short-term or longer-term accommodation purposes. So we are recommending those changes to that property tax policy. We are here today at Committee of the Whole, which is typically our practice with policies, that you have an opportunity to ask questions, make suggestions. We would then incorporate any changes that you might have into that policy and then bring that back to council for approval. In this case, we're targeting November 1st, presuming that there are not significant changes to the property tax policy. And then an option that we have related to this that you'll see for your consideration during budget is the opportunity to advance a capital project to revisit our property tax policy via a task force. We about 10 years ago had a task force which developed the property tax policy, which developed our philosophy towards property taxes, and also this approach that we're looking at here. And really much has changed in our landscape since then, so you'll hear more about that in November when we start meeting as a finance committee. But just wanted to flag it because it's connected to this. So, and with that, I conclude my presentation, and Megan and I are both available for questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers, for that very clear and concise presentation. And from my perspective, it certainly aligns with the intent of council with the original change. And thank you for catching that we need to deal with the Vital Homes piece.
Ms. Dalrymple caught that. Thank you.
Looking to members of council to see if they have any questions. I see none. So thank you very much. I would say it's good to come back on November 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to call a break now, just because it's a good time to do so. And so let's come back at 3:30 or 2:35.
Party.
I should know this, but was there an update from TCK as to what they decided for the, who is on the board?
Yes. So the first point of my report.
Yeah.
Proposal to change the bylaws and it's represented changes to allow. So yes, so that's what's going forward.
They did decide that? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. But Mike's hadn't been on the whole time. Good thing nothing was missed. Yeah. 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 Sorry, Robin. Yeah, around. I'm just going to see if there's an actual. I guess it would be under protective services. There's been a lot of discussion in the community around wildlife attractants, and in particular the mama bear and cubs that had to be euthanized, which of course was devastating for all of us to hear. And I was wondering if there was an update on the causation around that, or if there is any causation that can be attributed to that particular incident. Mr. Mackay?
Absolutely. Let me just pull up a note here. But I do believe that our enforcement team understands that with those incidents specifically, those bears had become habituated and then eventually food conditioned. And then once bears are food conditioned, they're more likely to cause a public safety incident. So that was the primary driver of
Now, Mr. Mackay, the question, of course, comes to council if we're doing enough. And from my perspective, the governance pieces are in place to prohibit the wildlife attractants, to require fruit to be removed from trees, no storing of garbage outdoors unless it's bear-proof bin, etc. But I understand there might have been, that there's some questions around commercial waste. And I was wondering if there are some efforts in that regard to ensure compliance with our bylaws.
Absolutely. There were a few visits to businesses early in the summer, springtime, to discuss with a couple of select businesses how their bins could constitute a wildlife attractant. A few more of those interactions occurred through the summer, And then coming up, our municipal enforcement team is looking at a more formalized program to do inspections of businesses, particularly their outdoor bins, to ensure that they're not a wildlife attractant, that the attractants are secured.
Thanks. And before turning to other questions, I have one more. Has there been any consideration given to increasing the fines for non-compliance, given the drastic impact that it can have on either people or wildlife when there's interactions?
It's not something that administration has considered at this time. What I would say is that our officers had a number of interactions with residences that had wildlife attractants present, issued warnings, and then when they went back to see if the issue had been addressed, only a handful of tickets were given out. So it would appear as though the education approach was working, generally speaking.
Great, thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had an additional sort of question along the similar lines. And I guess my question was, I understand that we have GIS information on fruit-bearing trees on private property throughout the community. And, you know, getting officers onto properties and knocking on doors is, as you know, labor intensive. And we, our bylaw department has being pulled in different ways. I'm wondering if there's been any thought in specifically earlier in the year, like March or April, sending a letter out to those homeowners directly to remind them of their responsibility, especially since we don't keep track of who buys and sells homes over time, to remind them of their responsibility, and it would just sort of take a bit of work. It's not a lot of work off of bylaw, but it would take a bit of work off of bylaw and sort of underpin that whole education piece, be a bit more proactive. I don't know if that's been thought of.
Our proactive efforts haven't included such an action like that one, but certainly something that we can consider into the spring.
Thanks a lot.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Coursert, and thanks to administration. Under the land use bylaw, what are the regulations for downtown businesses regarding waste enclosures? Do commercial garbage bins have to be inside a structure, or are they allowed to be outside? And how is this something that we could look at to help with in the future with reducing these types of incidents?
I'll try to answer your question there, and then perhaps pass to Ms. Smithers when it comes to the land use bylaw. I would say our wildlife attractant bylaw does provide an enforcement tool surrounding the securement of wildlife attractants. I don't know if there's anything else that would exist in the land use bylaw that could be used to address that. What the purpose of the community standards bylaw was really to try to have a lot of those pieces in one spot that would apply to both businesses and residences.
I haven't memorized the land use bylaw, but I can look into that and get back to you.
I know there have been, my recollection is there is a requirement, but there's often a variance allowable. And so, for example, behind the tavern, when that property renovated, they didn't put their garbage in an enclosed space, but when you have behind Good Earth over here, when they renovated, they did. So it's perhaps, that's one area we could look at. I have one more question, if I may. Okay. This year was a low berry season, and I've noticed a pattern over the past 20 years that when there is a low berry crop, it does lead to more black bears being within our developed areas downtown. When we're in a year that has a low berry crop, could we consider a different response or a different policy around how we respond to wildlife attractants in advance. My thinking being, so we know it's a low berry crop, we know bears are going to be in town, and so enforcement begins on, or reminders go out to businesses that, you know, secure your wildlife attractants. We expect bears to be in town. And so instead of being reactive to the bear being there, we're recognizing that one of the inputs, which is the berry crop, will affect wildlife in our community, and we can react in advance. I don't know if you got my question out of that.
I'll take a stab. Essentially to say that responding to, I suppose, the seasonal condition in berry crop may be difficult just based on the ability to plan resources in order to put towards that in a very timely manner. I do think with our municipal enforcement team, this is certainly top of mind and will be into future seasons. And so I see them moving forward with some of the same steps consistently to keep it front of mind for residents, visitors, and businesses.
Yeah, I see it similar to the Steep Creek hazard situation where we're measuring inputs of what the risk is and we're adjusting what we do accordingly. I think a low berry crop season is a risk that we should be responding to. Thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Back to Mr. Mackay. Back to the situation, the unfortunate situation with the mama bear and the 2 cubs. Was it a fruit tree situation, or was it a blend of a commercial waste bin plus a fruit tree? Or I'm just trying to clarify that in my head here.
You know, as a not directly involved in that circumstance, I'd be hesitant to pin it on one specific thing, other than to say that a number of interactions caused the bear or bears to become food conditioned.
Okay.
But I couldn't point to exactly what the circumstances would have been that tipped the scale.
Okay, and going back, you said like this previous year there's an education piece and you guys went back and you saw that there was a degree of compliance. The kind of compliance that we were getting back from the citizens, was that them removing the tree or removing the fruit? What sort of avenue are often citizens choosing?
You know, I don't have the stats on that, whether it was the fruit or the tree that was removed. But what I can say is that the enforcement efforts did create what seemed to be an increase in participation in the fruit tree removal grant program that the town provides, that we saw an uptick in participation in that after enforcement actions or municipal enforcement warnings were given.
Right. And this is riffing a little bit off of Councillor Flaubert's talking about, if we are flagging perhaps, oh, this could be a season where there's going to be trouble, are there ways we could perhaps consider boosting the program's enticement? So, hey, this year, if we know there's going to be more berries, there's going to be an issue, tree removal this year, we're going to cover, rather than 50% of the cost, a different amount, or we'll cover the same 50%, but you can choose a small economical tree of your choice that we'll put in for you.
I mean, such a change mid-season may require a budget amendment. And while we don't have the statistics related to where we are at when it comes to the fruit tree removal grant in front of us, unless you do.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're doing great. Keep going.
You got it, Mackay.
But that's, you know, as we get into budget time, I think that's something that we could report back on what has been utilized out of that fund as far as removal grants, and look to see if council would like to perhaps change the percentage or increase the level of funding for that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
If I could just add to that, I agree with everything he said. And I think we don't have a biologist on staff, so we don't have the capacity to know when it's a high-risk berry season or if it's the year to, and we set budgets in December, sometimes for 2 years ahead. So we can work on partnering with the province and being nimble. We are much more nimble, intending no disrespect, than they are, and there's not always agreement with biologists. So, you know, even there would be a whole process for us being able to have good data that is validated by the province for us to make those decisions. So I'm not saying we can't do any of that, but I am saying that's not an in-house thing, and it would be outside of process. So It's not impossible, it's just not a normal course of action, and we don't have the expertise on staff.
Right, right. Sometimes I feel like when I talk to Nick DeReuter from WildSmart through like the lens of Biosphere, he seems to flag that. Hey, I think this is a year it's going to be a particular challenge. So I understand where you're coming from. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I'm going through the community standards bylaw, which we just passed not so long ago, and I note that causing noise is a $250 fine. Person feeding wildlife is a $250 fine. Could the administration comment on why all fines were set at exactly the same rate, and what council has for opportunities there?
You know, I don't have the detailed background as to why they were all set at the same rate, but I can say that our municipal enforcement team, as well as a contract lawyer, looked carefully at this, and they're the ones who bring these fines forward if they're challenged in court. So I suppose there's a reasonability test that occurred there, but I can certainly report back with some additional detail as to how we landed on those fines in the bylaw.
Do we have an opportunity to take fines and apply them to certain programs? The tree removal program or replacement program, could we take fines from wildlife attractants and apply it to programs like that?
So essentially, I believe what you're suggesting is to use fines to fund tree removal, if you will?
Correct.
Potentially. I think it's something, again, we should look at as part of the budget process.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the wildlife attractant piece, we're not collecting a great number of fines, at least we didn't this year. And so while that dollar value will be fairly small, you may find it's more impactful to go with the current funding source and situation for that, as opposed to relying on fines, which can also fluctuate from year to year.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm looking to fully support one program with it, but any fines that were generated via that would go to that program to help it. And personally, I think that a $250 fine for a wildlife attractant isn't heavy-handed enough. And we've spent a lot of time and effort with education over the last few years, and education should absolutely continue. However, a bigger hammer also gets better compliance over time, in my opinion. And I look forward to revisiting these numbers during budget time. Do we know how many fines were handed out for wildlife attractants?
Yes, so I'll answer that question with a little bit more detail than just fines, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So there were 101 case files created this year related to wildlife attractants. 84 of those were proactive case files, meaning an officer went out, noted the wildlife attractant, and created the case file there. 27 were in response to calls. Some of these would have been handled more informally, as far as a comment to somebody that they need to make a change there. But we did issue 51 warnings and 6 tickets.
One more, if I may. Can the town proactively demand the removal of trees on private property? I've got a fruit tree in my yard, never ever been a bear in it, it's never been a problem. Can the town say, you need to remove that tree?
I suppose I would go back to the community standards bylaw, which deals with wildlife attractants, and that bylaw would prohibit the installation of any new
trees, yeah,
fruit trees, and then it also deals with the attractant being not the tree itself necessarily, but the fruit of the tree.
Right.
So if it were a new tree, I suppose we could demand the removal of it.
Mm-hmm.
If it was an existing tree, then we could take steps to have the fruit, which is the attractant, removed. But there's nothing in our bylaws that I'm aware of that would allow us to remove fruit trees or demand the removal across the board.
let me rephrase my question just a tad then. If council was to demand the removal of fruit trees on private property, would that hold up in a court?
I'd have to get back to you on that one and bring a lawyer into that discussion.
And lastly, it's come to my attention that the town does have some trees that could be considered wildlife attractants. Can you tell me what the town has been doing with regards to these trees?
I know that some of those have been addressed. And Ms. Smithers, I'm not sure if you have anything to add about future plans there.
We have been removing some of those trees, most recently around Elevation Place, I believe, and we will be continuing to do so as budget allows. Part of the balance that we have is definitely we want to remove them because they are wildlife attractants, but at the same time, we also see the benefit in an urban forest and a tree canopy. So we need to replace as well as we remove. So again, that's where, as budget allows, we do that work.
Is there a time frame on when we would remove the last tree?
No, not at this time, no.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I did have.
I just have a couple other things. First of all, I want to note that, you know, Canmore is a leader in providing policies and procedures around human-wildlife coexistence, and so we can't lose sight of that. And I also think that we can't lose sight of even a perfect system is still going to have a possibility of some bears having to be removed, or humans being hurt, because there are things that are beyond our control. It could be a sick animal. It could be somebody not following the rules, doing things that they're not supposed to, and doing so without any opportunity to have warned them or educated them in advance. So I just want to point that out. I am wondering about also the same thing as I mentioned before, if combined with education, higher fines, particularly for repeat offense or not heeding warnings, would be a little bit more of an incentive to do one's role and be part of the solution. So that is something that I just put out there. But I also want to note that I see in our report here under solid waste services that we do have a commercial food waste recommendation coming to us that will also further, I believe, take that very attractant, prone element of our garbage and require it to be separated and moved out, as opposed to be sitting in a garbage can or something like that. So, Ms. Smithers.
Yeah, sorry, just to further on that, I did have a chance to scan through the 567 pages in the land use bylaw, and just wanted to point out that there is a clause, a policy in the bylaw, or a clause in the bylaw that does require garbage and compost and recycling to be stored in weatherproof and animal-proof containers and screened from adjacent sites and public thoroughfares. And that's in addition to in the recycling and waste bylaw, where it states that no person shall dispose of waste anywhere in town other than in an animal-proof container or an animal-proof enclosure. And then that also references the town's engineering, design, and construction guidelines, which again require animal-proof waste bins on commercial and residential, well, commercial developments and then residential areas, because then that speaks to the haul-all bins that the town uses in residential areas.
Thank you for that clarification, and it just further underlines for me that we have the proper rules and policies in place, maybe some tweaking around fines or otherwise, but what we really need, in addition to education, is we really do need all of our residents to step up and be part of the solution. And if everybody can take a look at their sphere of influence and protect it from being a wildlife attractant, then it will be better for all of us. Any other questions on that regard? Okay, then we are still doing administrative review. So under anything else under section B? Councillor Faubert?
Are we connecting the changes in the plans for New Year's to climate change? Is this kind of one of the things that's affecting our ability to use a particular site?
You could interpret those changes to being connected. I think it's partly operational and partly patterns that have been noticed that have been created challenges for the New Year's Eve event in recent years.
Was there any thought on transit or the different, using that different location, it being farther from the downtown and more vehicle traffic versus people movement?
As the event gets planned, I would imagine that those things will be taken into account by our event permitting team, but I can follow up to ensure.
I'm really excited that we have a New Year's event coming up. It's been a real struggle, I know, for our admin as well as the community, that the skating pond isn't what it used to be. I don't think that's anyone's fault other than our climate is changing, and the source of that water is from an underground fed spring. And sometime, like we had that earthquake and it stopped running. And then, I'm very excited to be part of this event this year. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum?
Have we moved on to a municipal infrastructure yet, or are we still?
Not yet.
Okay, all right. Let me know when we go there.
Well, let me just ask, does anybody have any questions around corporate services? Seeing none, then yes, we have moved to infrastructure.
Wunderbar.
So please proceed.
Wunderbar. I have a question about the Palliser Area Structure Plan. No surprise. I'm curious about the statement, project scoping work is underway, excellent, including the formulation of options for the delivery of a plan that would support increased development of the Palliser lands in the short term. So does that mean, and excuse me if I'm misunderstanding the statement, that we aren't looking at a larger long-term plan, or we're looking at low-hanging fruit as well as not so low-hanging fruit?
We're looking at ways to get the policy work done as efficiently as possible. So as you can appreciate, statutory policy plans can be as big as you want to make them. We're looking at doing the right amount of work as quickly as we can, which would influence, for example, things like how we approach the community engagement on the plan.
Okay, so thank you. Okay.
Do we have a sense on timing of that plan? Like, do we have a sight on when we would like to have that done by?
Not at this point. Again, the town isn't the only landowner in that area, so I know that the project planner is in the process of working with other affected landowners, trying to get to kind of a shared understanding of what we can accomplish and by when, and then at that point we'll be bringing something forward for information for council.
Okay. On the topic of ASPs, or ARPs maybe, the town center, can you give an update on where we would be with the town center planning?
We haven't started scoping that one because the Palliser ASP is our priority right now.
Okay. Do you see those two at some point being somewhat moving forward concurrently, like there's one part moving on one and another part on the other? Once the one's going, you can start the other one at the same time?
I would expect yes.
Okay, so
yeah.
Okay. I had a question around, I guess it would fall under municipal infrastructure. It actually has to do with, I believe, transit. On Grotto Road, there's a new transit stop, I believe, being built there. I mean, it's jutting out with a new cement being poured, and it's gone onto those empty lots that the town owns on Grotto Road. And I was just wondering, is that a transit stop? And what are the implications of that construction with those lots being able to be used as residences?
So those are the residential lots that the town acquired after the flood?
Correct.
Yeah. The intent is still to sell those once the work at Cougar Creek flood mitigation has progressed to a point where the town is comfortable with releasing them for redevelopment. So that being said, I don't imagine that the bus stop improvements would impact that developability. I will check with engineering and just confirm that and get back to you, though.
If you could, because it does look like the access for either of those is now limited. Granted, there could be a driveway still. But the cement that has been poured has gone back onto on what would others would all be part of their yards for the other houses. It's actually beyond, I don't think that there's a right of way onto the lot, and it's gone onto the lots.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I can check into it and get back to you. The intent has always been, once Cougar Creek flood mitigation has progressed sufficiently, that the town would sell those lots.
Great, thank you. Any other questions around section D? Seeing none. Looking at the council resolution action lists. Any questions or comments around that? Seeing none. We have correspondence, and we have no in-camera, so we have come to the end of our committee of the whole meeting. I'll move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.